Today I'm going to share some super easy hacks to turn everyday objects like charger plates into awesome new items. Welcome to the Chic Show. Today's playlist is hosted by DIY with Aria, Loli D's Creations, and guest hosted by At Home with Gigi. And today we are focusing on charger plates. I've collected a variety of charger plates to choose from. First, I'm going to be choosing from some of these wicker charger plates that go under paper plates. I'm also going to be using one of these doilies. I chose to use the darker colored of the plate and also of the doily. Now I'm using these larger needles and a little bit of embroidery thread just to attach the doily to the paper plate holder. I don't want to damage either one of them, and I want them to be removable. I thread the embroidery floss through there a couple of times and then tied it on the back. Once I have all four sides tied up, I'm just going to trim off the excess thread. You don't even really have to add a hanger to the back of this, but I did, and I just used a paper clip. I added this little piece to my basket wall in my bathroom. For the second paper plate holder, I'm using this one, and it does have some stains on it, but I think I'll be able to cover that up. And I'm also using this glass cloche. I thrifted this little white bird, but it was a little too white for me, so I painted it with some off-white chalk paint, and then I let that dry and then added on some antique wax by Waverly. I wanted to bring out those details a little bit. This is a little moss sheet from Dollar Tree, and I'm just going to be tracing around the cloche onto the back of the sheet and cut that out. I want this moss to fit underneath the cloche. So the key here is to cut inside the line that you've drawn, not the outside and not right on top of the line. Now I can start adding some things under the cloche. I chose this little nest, and I added in some Spanish moss as well as these little eggs along with my bird. And lastly, I added in a couple of sprigs of greenery that I had in my stash and replaced the cloche, and this makes for a cute little spring vignette. For project 3, I'm using one of these planters that I've had from Dollar Tree for quite a while, and I'm just removing the hanger at the top, and I'm going to be adding some leather to the front. This, of course, is faux leather from Dollar Tree, and I chose the color that I wanted, and now I'm just laying it down so that I can trace around the planter and cut it out. I did cut it a little bit bigger than I needed it because I didn't want to make any mistakes and have it not cover the front. So I'm adding some hot glue along the edges just in sections so that I have time to get it down there and get it straight. Now I'm tracing around the back again so I know exactly where to cut off the excess. And then I added the rest of that leather and made any additional cuts that I needed to make. Here's where that charger plate comes in. I found a black one recently at Dollar Tree, and I wanted to attach this planter into the center of that charger plate, and it fits perfectly. So I added a little bit of green moss to the planter just to kind of get an idea of what it was going to look like. Now to attach it to the plate, I chose to use some of this foam tape, and I had to add several layers of it because the planter didn't want to fit flush against that charger because of the way the planter's made. So I added about 3 or 4 layers of that foam tape. That wasn't enough, and I added a couple of more, and that seemed to do the job. This way I can use this for now, and I can make changes to it later or take it apart completely. I added a few succulents, and I think this turned out very cute. I would love to know what you think. Project number 4 is a little bit more involved than the other ones. For this one, I'm using an old charger plate that I had that had 2 cracks in it, so this is the perfect one to upcycle. I took it outside and gave it a coat of spray paint, but I ran out of spray paint, so I brought it back inside, and I'm just using some Waverly chalk paint in white. Now I'm going to set that aside to dry, and I'm going to be adding a mold trim from IOD's Trimmings 4 molds, and I will need to cast about 4 of these molds in order to go all the way around the plate. All of the trimmings molds are made so that you can make more than one and they just fit nicely into each other. The only trouble that I had was I did have some spacing issues in between, but I'll show you how we fix that in a minute. Also, after it dries, it does sometimes kind of separate. So I'm adding some extra clay that I am just fitting into those cracks. And it also does help if you paint your molds first. This will help keep them from cracking and from separating. Once I have filled in all the gaps, I chose to use DIY paint in Prom Queen to paint this entire piece. The details on these molds are beautiful, so I want to bring those out by adding some white wax. Now I want this white wax to go down into the cracks and crevices and stay there. So I'm going to be adding it on and in sections and then going back with a paper towel and wiping off the excess that's on top, leaving what's in the cracks. Now I wanted to cover up the center of the plate where the clay meets the plate because it wasn't completely, well, it wasn't really as neat as I would have liked it. So I decided to use this little wood wreath, and I removed the beads that were on it. Some of them I had already removed for another project, and of course here I have a little extra help. I replaced the beads with some white beads that I had, and then I just hooked it back together once I had it cut to the size I wanted. Of course, I'm going to work with the shape here and make sure that I get it shaped back and got any of those little kinks out. This would be all that I was going to do, but I still felt like those details weren't standing out enough for me, so I decided to use some Rub and Buff. So I'm going to be dry brushing onto the top of all those swirl details. Any place that I felt like there wasn't quite enough, I just went back over those another layer or two. Now I'm using hot glue to attach the beads. I would recommend using a combination of hot glue and something that will hold more permanently. This was just a quick fix for the video's sake for now, and I will have to go back and add something more permanent later. I made sure that the hook on the wreath was actually at the top in an area where I wanted to cover up with this little fleur-de-lis. This was poured with resin and then spray painted gold. And for the final detail, I cut out an M for my initial on my Cricut and added that to the center. Before we take a look back at all of my projects today, I'd like to wish my YouTube friends a very happy April birthday. Be sure and wish them a happy birthday as well. As always, I want to invite you to subscribe if you haven't, like this video if you do, and hit share to spread the chic. Thanks again to our hosts today. Be sure and check out the playlist and the host channels in the description box below. Here's another video I think you might like right here. Thanks so much for watching. Remember to share the chic. Bye now.